Mine really.
Good evening. Tonight's presentation is being recorded by Area 58 and will at a later date be available to watch on YouTube. I'm Shirley Graff, Chair of the Beautification Committee, and Tina Palmer and Wendy Greco and Bob Hodge are also members of the Beautification Committee. The Beautification Committee has two upcoming events. On March 21st, the HPC will lead a walk at Campus Omicron, which is the end of Lingham Street. Trails at the camp go down to and by West Ponset Pond. The walk starts at 10 a.m. and will be about 2 to 3 miles and lasts about an hour. Cookies and hot chocolate will be provided after the walk. If trails are icy, the walk will be canceled. On May 2nd and 3rd, the Halifax Beautification Committee will hold its spring cleanup. We will be down at the town hall from 9 to 4 on Saturday and 1 to 4 on Sunday to hand out litter busting supplies, and a pizza party is planned for noon on Saturday. And I'm personally excited by tonight's topic, diagrammist fish and local fish passage improvements in the spring. I love going to local herring runs to watch all the fish racing up to go up the stream. The Pembroke Herring Run on Route 14, the Olive Mill Park off of Route 44 in Middleborough, and the Town Brook by Jenny Gristmill Pembroke are just a few of the places to witness the springtime event. Thank you, Brad Chase, for coming tonight to give the presentation. The HBC has a small couple gifts for you, some fishing lures. And I pick out fishing lures like I do bottles of wine. I look at the label. And this one looked kind of cute. There's a few more. And also is a fishing best excuses. So if you don't catch any fish, you can read this book and come up with a few more. Plus it has a few cute little fishing trivia, like in 2009, Illinois was the first state to incorporate bass fishing as a high school sport. But you didn't know that. Didn't know. So, Brad, take over.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you.
I need all the excuses and fishing tackle I can get, so I appreciate it. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Brad Chase. I work for the State Division of Marine Fisheries as our diatomaous fish project leader. And tonight I'm going to talk about the spring migrations of diatomaous fish. I'm going to focus on the Stump Brook watershed to talk about some local issues, but first introduce our project and then some of the species that we work with. And it's a small group, so I think if you have any questions, feel free to ask at any time. So in Massachusetts, we have about 15 species of diatomaous fish. These are sea-run fish. These are the ones that switch habitats between marine and fresh waters to complete their life history. And they're not very common on the planet. They're about 1% of the fish on the planet. And in Massachusetts, most are anadromous, which means they're born in fresh water. They go out to the ocean to live and mature and then come back to where they were born. The one catadromous species is the American eel, and that's born way out of the Sargasso Sea. It comes to freshwater habitats to live. These are some of the common ones. I think the software here changed my fonts a little bit, so hopefully you can read everything, but things have been changed a touch. Here's a pike net we have right now fishing in the Fall River in Braintree. It intercepts rainbow smelt, but this net has caught 10 different species of diatomaous fish. So here's some of the common players. We have river herring, which is both alewife and blueback. They're the most common, the most abundant species in Massachusetts. They're the one I think the public probably pays the most attention to. American shad, they're one of the largest. They're fun to catch, they're fun to eat. They're in the Taunton River watershed. They used to come up the Setauket River and maybe further. We're hoping to restore them in this watershed. Rainbow smelt used to be in this watershed. They're kind of fading away at southern areas. I think one of the best fried fish in Massachusetts. They're very tasty. And then American eel, they're everywhere, but their abundance has declined. But these are the ones that we pay the most attention to because there's modest fisheries for these species, and I think the public has a strong interest in these 4. There are many others. Striped bass is one of the biggest, but they're not here on spawning migrations. They're here for feeding migrations, so my group doesn't work with them as much. We're really here to try to open up the fishways and allow these fish to come up to where they need to spawn. But we still want to recognize it's a beautiful, large fish that people catch all the time. Sea-run brook trout. That's a common diatomeous fish that has been depleted in numbers. The sturgeons, a very ancient fish that are found in some systems. Some folks think they're in the Taunton River, but we haven't seen them in years. And then lamprey, a very ancient fish. They don't have jaws, they have an oral disc to suck on other fish, to suck their blood. So they're parasitic. I'm told I have to care about them. They freak me out, but I guess they're one of the fish I'm supposed to pay attention to. So, yeah, the font's changed a little bit. So why do they do this? It seems like an odd thing to do to change habitats between the marine and the ocean. Well, the thought is that diatomy evolved a long time ago to produce a gain in fitness over a life history that didn't migrate. And so when I say fitness, I mean lifetime reproductive success. So we think this adaptation may have occurred a long time ago. Competition with the gene pool, where some fish stayed in the ocean, some fish went up the rivers, or environmental selection. We don't know. It happened a long time ago. There could have been different pathways for different species. Some fish may have lived in the ocean and decided to poke up fresh water to maybe find a place to put their eggs, a safe place where the eggs could survive. Other fish might have lived up in the fresh water, decided to go out and found some really good feeding in the ocean. Either way, we don't know what happened. We do expect that the origin was fish that lived in one place and found an advantage to go someplace else. Here's a picture of alewife and smelt in Weymouth Back River. They come up about the same time. The smelt come first, then the alewife comes soon after it. Sometimes you see both of those species moving together. So why do we manage these? Well, historically, they really provided big fisheries. People used to catch these to eat years ago, and then at this time, about 100 years ago in the Cape, all this was river herring used for bait for ground fisheries. And so it was big money. My dad grew up down the street from here. In the 1930s, he would go to this site to see the trucks. He cared about the fish, but he was more interested in the trucks because they were the biggest trucks he ever saw to bring all this bait to the Boston market. So they used to be valuable. They're still valuable as a forage. Everything you can imagine eats these things. And many species of fish, wildlife, birds have migrations to intercept their migrations. And then I think these fish need help. They're coming up from the ocean. When you have a blizzard like we had 2 weeks ago, you have tree falls, you have things that get in their way. You have to find ways to open up their passage. So, again, historical fisheries, and now we have local management, state, federal, and interstate management. We have population assessments that occur, and my agency gets involved with that. We have harvest management, and then we get involved into passage improvements and habitat improvements, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So this is my project that I work with. Again, we focus on fish passage improvements and habitat restoration, and then we do a lot of monitoring to learn about fish biology that can inform the management of these species. So that's what my crew does. About 100 years ago, these fish were managed town by town, and then there was a lot of privatization of these runs, where private firms were really taking too many fish, and there was a lot of concern with locals in towns. They couldn't get access to fish, so they petitioned to have it become a state resource. So in the 30s, it became a Commonwealth of Massachusetts resource, and my agency got involved with managing it. And they developed a fishway crew in 1934 that I run presently. And from the 30s to 80s, there was a lot of fishway activity. The crew was up to 8 guys, and they built a lot of fishways. Presently, we still build fishways, but we tend to also do a lot of monitoring as well. So the project goes back almost 100 years. So here's fish passage and habitat restoration. We have a small shop in New Bedford. We do a lot of welding of aluminum fishways, build concrete forms, wood fishways, and we install these fishways with a crew. Here's a small fishway we built for the Jones River in Kingston and installed it in 2012. We redid the masonry for all these weirs. Has anyone been to Stony Brook down in Brewster? It's kind of an iconic mill site down there where people love to go to see the herring. We rebuilt those masonry weirs about 10 years ago. So it's a service that we provide with our crew, and we're pretty handy at working on these small fishways. We do get involved with collaborations on bigger fishways with contracts, and then we get involved with eel passage, dam removal, as well as, oh, that's not work, there we go. Let's try to work, and then fish channel improvements. Here's a fishway form we did down in Orleans in the Cape. We built this in New Bedford at our shop, disassembled it, brought it back out in the field, reassembled it, and then poured concrete in it. And that's one of the bigger fishways I think our crew does. If it gets much bigger than that, we tend to contract out. And so other fish passage responsibilities, we issued fishway permits. So we have a regulatory hat as well. These fish really need help, so DNF has the regulatory responsibility to work with property owners to make sure they're not blocking fish. We write fishway operations maintenance plans. We write fishway memorandums of understanding to understand how to go ahead with a fishway project on private property. We maintain an excavator that helps us do jobs, and we have a small stocking truck where we can stock herring from one place to another. And so again, we do stocking, we do habitat assessments, fishway maintenance, and we do a lot of run channel maintenance. We find that you just can't stop some of these debris jams, some of these tree falls. And if a river is really large, like the Charles River, some of these bigger rivers, you don't have these problems because the water just rushes through and moves things out. Most rivers, though, have these type of problems. This was a town river in West Bridgewater, and when I got there, there were thousands of dead juvenile herring on this side that had been impinged by this tree fall that became a big mess of roots and vines. And so someone just has to get out and do that work. So we do quite a bit of that type of...
Is that because the current had slowed down enough for the soil and sediment to build up?
Yes.
Because they can get through.
They can get through a lot.
Yeah.
This took about 3 years for it to get to this point, and but it started with a tree fall. And again, if this was a big river, it would flush out and you wouldn't have to worry about it. But so many rivers on our coastline have got such low flow, they don't scour things out. So I have seen a lot of natural fish kills when these debris jams build up. And it usually takes 2 or 3 years before that can be a problem. So a little bit more on stream channel maintenance. I feel like it's a growing problem. We had a coastwide harvest ban for river herring 20 years ago. And I think some towns have kind of lost some of that stewardship where they would go out and look for these things. And also I think we're using more and more water in our coastal areas. We're using more surface water, we're using more groundwater. I'm seeing less surface flow in my career. And so what I think is happening, we're seeing more of these debris jams. We're seeing more native and non-native wetland plants encroach the channel. And so we're seeing more of these jams. 30 years ago, people I used to work with, they didn't do this work. It wasn't that common. And you see, this is from 1960, so the work did happen, but it wasn't super common. We prepared guidelines in 2016 to try to do this work responsibly. And then we worked with DEP in 2022 to get a policy to direct how this work would happen under the Wetlands Protection Act. So we don't want to take out too much. We want to do it responsibly. We now have a policy that drives this. And we have since developed 13 town plans to help people maintain these fishways. Another problem I'm seeing, I never used to see this. These fish want to leave in the summer or the fall. Sometimes there's not enough flow to get them out of reservoirs, and I'm seeing them leave after the tree fall, all the leaves fall off the trees. And I'm seeing mortality now, and they're getting caught up in leaf jams. You'd never expect it, but especially on Cape Cod, you're seeing fish die every year because they leave so late that they just get caught up in these leaf jams.
You think that has to do with well, I've noticed this is lack of heavy rain in the summer, especially like in the evenings and at night. It seems that like we get these pulses of rain in the summer that don't even get beneath the canopy. And then we finally start getting heavier rains in the later fall. Is that what's driving the herring to leave then? Instead of when we've had consistent droughts
Yes.
in the early fall.
Recent droughts, it's dynamic. Whatever's happening is fairly recent to my eye. And I think every community is different, depends where you get your water, groundwater, reservoirs. But I think in many cases, the fish simply can't leave.
Yeah.
There's no outflows. They can't leave in October. They wait till late November and they encounter these things. So it's I don't think I ever worried about leaves 20 years ago. And so it's kind of a concern. Sometimes you're just digging sand shoals, but I think it's something that has to be kept an eye on. And I think it's important to work with locals to try to find ways to do this. We worked with Jeremy, 2 years ago out in Stump Brook. And we didn't find a lot of problems, but I think you have to get out there and take a look at things. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to talk about monitoring briefly, and then introduce the species we work with, and then lead into some local issues in the Stump Brook watershed. So river herring, again, that's our top species we work on. Most people, I think, that's what the public likes to see in the spring. American shad, we're doing more and more. We're stocking shad in the Taunton River right now with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife. And so that's kind of exciting to wonder how far the shad will go upstream when they come back. We've got 4 fight net stations out for rainbow smelt. We're catching them right now as they come up. And then we have a series of American eel traps that we monitor. I'm not going to go into data too much. I thought I'd just introduce the species, encourage questions, and then I'll get into some of the local projects. So for river herring, again, 2 species very closely related, blueback and alewife. The most abundant fish we have here in Massachusetts for sea-run fish. And they typically come back 3 years after leaving their natal river. So they live out in the ocean for 3 years, they come back right to where they were born. And there was a lot of concern for these fish, and there was 2 reviews under the Endangered Species Act to see if they should be listed as endangered species. In both cases, they felt it wasn't warranted. There's a lot of river herring, maybe they declined quite a bit, but it didn't qualify for endangered species. And this looks like this piece got cut off here, but we work a lot with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. They conduct a stock assessment to see how many river herring are there on the East Coast. And so we're always doing monitoring that can feed into that stock assessment. Here's a graph. I guess I have some data. What this shows is spawning run counts for 4 rivers. Yeah, my laser's not working. In yellow's Mattapoisett River, blue's the Nemasket, Back River Weymouth is red, and the Monument River at the canal is green. We add these numbers up into bar graphs, and we track them from 1996 to the present. And then here's when we had the harvest ban in 2005. And what you can see is some modest improvement after the harvest ban. And this was a drought-influenced crash, not quite a crash, but a sharp decline that really had us concerned. And so we shut things down for harvest here. Things improved, and then 2014, 2019, there was some pretty good numbers around, and people started to question maybe we should open up some of these fisheries again. The Nemasket River asked for a harvest plan, and we gave it to them, but then we had low numbers in the very next year. So they chose not to open for harvest. Pembroke had big runs around here. They asked to open. We gave them a harvest plan in 2025. They haven't opened yet. And then Harwich and the Cape experienced over 1 million fish this year. And first time in 20 years any run in Massachusetts had 1 million fish. And so they have a harvest plan. They might open this year with a very modest harvest. But this gives you a glimpse that there's been some recent improvements, but a lot of fluctuations, and it's only 4 rivers. And unfortunately, the Mattapoisett River remains remarkably low. Very concerned about the Buzzards Bay region seems to have not this type of response that we're seeing on Cape Cod. And the further north you go, Boston north, the responses are better. And when you get into Maine, there's been some really nice responses. And I can't tell you really what that's all about, but we'll keep an eye on things, and hopefully we'll continue to see some responses. And this year here, I think the fish It got really cold mid-April, and they left the Nebraska River, and they never came back. And so I feel like this year's not as low as it shows. But either way, when you have years like this, I mean, those numbers, you'd like to see those numbers higher.
You think that the warming of the waters around here are bringing in new predatory fish that are
That's an excellent question. I think
maybe, like I've noticed like the bluefish seem to come in earlier.
yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's a great question. I'm going to touch on. I'm going to come back to the question was to this warming of our environment, of our oceans, does that allow predators to come in early? And I think it's a factor. I usually don't blame natural predators for things because they're supposed to be here. But sometimes you have mismatches when they can really intercept the peak of the migration and they never used to. So I'm going to come back to that one, Jeremy, in a minute. A little more on the river herring harvest. So people would ask, why would we go back to a harvest? It's been closed for 20 years. And I think my agency supports it because it's a traditional cultural practice on our coastline. We'd love to see kids have some chance to experience that activity, to get herring for food or for bait for shore fishing. Many people can't afford boats, but if you use herring from the shore, you have a chance of getting a legal-sized striped bass. So we'd like some opportunity, and we want to teach the future generation about stewardship. So it's a decent argument to say why we go back to this, but I think our agency would like to see some access, some limited access to have people exposed to it. And some people love to eat these fish. That's a traditional cultural practice. So we are interested in seeing some ability to open again, but we have to have the numbers. So on to American eel. Again, yeah, I apologize, the font gets screwed up with the software, but it's the only catadromous fish in North America, the only fish that behaves this way, where it's born in the ocean and it comes to fresh water. Panmictic means it's a single genetic stock throughout its entire range from Prince Edward Island, really Labrador, down to Brazil, one genetic stock. But with river herring, you've got all these different genetic stocks with the different runs. Semoparus means it spawns once and dies. It's hard to imagine. That's not a very exciting life history, but that's what they do. They have one chance to get up to the Sargasso Sea, they spawn and die. They have a very high age of maturity. It's really, I should change that to 20. Males mature first. They get a small size, they get mature, they go off to spawn. Females stay and get larger so they can carry more eggs. So they want to become so large, they're one of the biggest freshwater fish in the watersheds. And then they can have that size to carry, huge numbers of eggs, 3 to 10 million eggs in a single fish. And again, Greenland to Brazil, very huge geographic range for this one species. They occupy more habitat types than any fish in North America. So I would consider them a very successful fish. And I used to think of them poorly, like the lamprey. It's slimy, it's hard to deal with, but they're actually a really fun fish. Very interesting species, and they are quite good to eat, actually. They're really good as a smoked fish. So we would like to restore their population so people can use some of these fish. A little more on eel, young of the year American eel. They come into our rivers soon as glass eels. They take about 1.5 years to migrate from the Sargasso Sea. They have magnetite in their skulls that helps them navigate using the Earth's magnetic fields. And they migrate west to the continental shelf. Once they get close, they use cues, freshwater cues on the continental shelf to go to different rivers, but there's no evidence that they home anywhere near where their parents came from. So really amazing life history. They hatch Sargasso Sea, they become leptocephali, they drift in, use the currents, and then they disperse, we think, randomly. But I think nature doesn't have a lot of things that are purely random, so I wonder if there's something about their life history we just don't understand. So something for you future biologists.
If the current changes like they're predicting, what's going to happen?
That's a great question. There's some really smart scientists in Japan, places where they really value eel. Eel is very important for the Japanese culture and markets. They're spending money looking at that question because they're worried.
Sure.
I don't think we can guess, but the Gulf Stream is changing. And, it could easily, we don't even know what sends eels to Chesapeake Bay versus Cape Cod, but it has to change if the currents change. And so we don't even know what's going to happen. We've been tracking these glass eels for 25 years, and the last 3 years have been some of the highest numbers of glass eels I've ever seen. we're setting records in a 25-year series, but our series that monitor the older eels are at historic lows. So are we going to see a response from all those glass eels coming in? It's hard to say, or are things changing and more eels coming to Massachusetts, but it's pretty amazing the numbers we're seeing from 2022 to present. So I'm a little hopeful, but I'm also cautious that we don't even know what's happening. And these are 2 silver eels, the little male with a female here. The Japanese are also actively trying to spawn these in captivity. And that's where this photograph comes in. They would love to have a market where they can control the market by growing them. Okay, so here's the leptocephali. They hatch from an egg, become this broad leafy larvae that uses the ocean currents to move. And when they get close, they transform into a glass eel with no pigment. So they can come into our rivers undetected. Then they settle into the mud and they slowly gain pigment. That's an elver, like a year old. We call them yellow eels next. Those are the ones that stay here for 10 years, 20 years before they mature. Then they become silver eels. And they leave in October during a rainstorm, during the new moon. They all leave at once. They go off to Sargasso Sea. So pretty fascinating life history. Okay, rainbow smelt. I threw these in there because we're doing a lot of work. We think they're extirpated from the Ton River watershed. They used to be here. They are very much a cold water fish. They grow fast, they don't live very long. People love to catch them because they're really tasty. They have antifreeze proteins in their blood and their tissues that let them function at very cold water. But that whole physiology isn't activated until the water is 4 degrees Celsius or colder. So we're very worried these fish might be doing poorly as our oceans warm up. They come up at night with a flood tide. They spawn just above the tide in freshwater riffles and they go back out. And then the eggs incubate for like 1 to 3 weeks. Right now the water's cold, so it'll take 3 weeks for those eggs to hatch. Then the larvae go right back out again. We have some smelt. What's the closest? Our closest net is the Wewiantic River in Wareham. We caught 2 smelt last year. So, 2. They're gone from around, they're gone from Connecticut. They used to go down to Maryland. So it's pretty amazing what's happening.
Even the Maine's having a problem with smell.
Yeah.
Because of black crappie a lot too, I think.
Predation could be an issue, but they are very much a cold water fish. They spawn, here's Cohasset, Bound Brook, here's the tide. They find that first riffle above the tide. They shoot up at night, the eggs are adhesive, they stick to the bottom, and the adults go back out again. Here's our net in Kingston, in the Jones River, and here's a school of smelt that missed the net. I don't know what was happening there, but it didn't work that day. They went right by the net, and they were schooling around here. And what I have found over the years is that these are all males. They come up at night with the females to spawn. The females are smart enough to leave. The males stick around. Just waiting for the next night, I suppose.
Is that near the Elm Street
Yeah.
Bridge?
Yes. Yep. Downstream. So we have 4 fyke nets out now, and here's the data from 2005 to present, and this is catch per effort, so the numbers we're catching per effort. And what you can see is the Parker River in Newbury, Fall River in Braintree, Jones River in Kingston, and the Wewiantic River in Wareham. Parker's crashed, just gone. We almost never see him. Wewiantic gets a couple. We had a little spike here, we had a large number here. Before I started this series, people were fishing down there with nets at night. It's the one place it's allowed. The state banned smelt fishing with nets in the spawning runs in 1876. But then a legislature put in a law saying you could take them by nets here. So there was quite a bit of smelt back before this study occurred. These were almost all 1-year-olds, and then almost nothing. Strangely, these are all negative trends. The trend in Fall River Braintree is positive. It's slowly going up, and I can't explain that. We catch a lot of smelt in Braintree. It's the biggest run in Massachusetts. It gives me hope that maybe those fish, something's going right. Maybe they're adapting a little bit, but it's interesting. There's still a fair amount of smelt at that one location. Now, if we look at temperature's effect, what we can show you, well, these graphs right here show you the day when they arrive, the Julian date when they arrive. So for the Fall River, the green is the peak, the orange is the onset when they begin. You can see those trends drifting downward. In the Jones, it's a little sharper. In both cases, it's a significant declining trend. They're showing up about 2 weeks earlier in a 20-year window in the Jones River. In the Fall River, they're showing up about 2 weeks earlier. But the peak is declining, but it's not a significant trend. But you can see the last few years, the peaking much earlier in the Fall River. So we're warming, and they're showing up earlier. Do we know we're warming for a fact? Well, we've got 30 years of bottom temperature data in Cape Cod Bay, and that's a significant trend where it shows during the smelt season and then during the winter. And the winter trend is almost 2 degrees in the last 10 years warmer than it was in the first 10 years. So 2 degrees Celsius doesn't sound like a lot. It's a lot to a fish that needs cold water. So our coastal waters are warming, and I think fish like Atlantic salmon, brook trout, rainbow smelt, they're not doing as well. American shad, river herring, I don't think they're bothered by these dynamics. So I'm going to finish with smelt by just talking about some of the things that we think might be happening, but this slide could apply to all these species. So fishing mortality, in some cases we're taking too many. We're harvesting too many. Jeremy brought up natural mortality. I think we've done a great job restoring predators, and we haven't done a lot with the bait fish. And so striped bass, bluefish, cormorants, otters, a lot of these predators, I'm just seeing the numbers really increase, and we haven't done much to help the fish. So I took this photo in 1989, so I've been working a long time. In Quincy, the locals said it ran black with smelt. For 5 weeks, the river was just full of smelt. And it was amazing how many are coming up. You have a hard time seeing any smelt now in the town of Quincy. They deposit an egg, it sticks to the bottom, and it's got to be there for 2 to 3 weeks to hatch. I think we don't see a lot of clean substrates. These fish probably adapted to come up the rivers, and they had clean water after, the snow melt. The glaciers were treated, rivers were clean, and over the years, these fish probably adapted to come up with the spring snow melt. And I don't think we have that clean bottom like we used to. So I'm concerned about these things. Habitat alteration, we've obviously changed our coastline a lot. And then we have to mention climate change. I know it's a little bit of a controversy, but here's the range of smelt historically 75 years ago, right, all the way down to Maryland in the red. And then here's their present range, Cape Wareham north. So they've lost 400 miles of range in about 75 years. If this was an alligator or a great white, it would be in the news. It's smelt and no one knows this has happened. So it is a factor, I think, for cold water fish. And then again, this applies to all diatomous species. We need to pay attention with passage barriers. Watershed developments have caused a lot of stormwater issues, a lot of drainage issues. And water management is becoming really important because I think we're just taking water as we need to in these watersheds, and we're not really thinking about what the rivers need. And so I think that we're really starting to squeeze what these rivers can do to support aquatic life. So I'm very worried about that, particularly in the fall when the juveniles herring need to leave. Then eutrophication means nutrients, which means nitrogen and phosphorus. It's related to our, production and processing of septic pollution and sewer pollution. I really worry about what I'm seeing. I'm seeing more algae in the rivers. I'm seeing more algal growth that I think impacts these demersal eggs. They want to attach to clean substrates. If they attach to this before it really starts to grow, then you're going to see those eggs engulfed, and you'll see poor survival. So those are things I think that apply to all fish. And again, there's the demersal egg. All right, let me move on to American shad. So it's of the genus Celosa, and it's the biggest one, 2 to 8 pounds in the spawning run. And these fish come back at about age 3, 4, or 5. They can be older. They arrive later in the spring and late in April, and they go further upstream than smelt and herring do. And historically, they came way up in the Setauket River. I don't know if they came to Stump Brook, but they came up in the Setauket River. And this fish was caught last year at an undisclosed location in the Taunton River. We've been stocking herring, and we collected 50 samples for genetic analysis last year. Run real, so that was a fun payday for us to go out and fish for them. But we're trying to confirm that these fish were the stocking fish, because we want to, if these fish are stock fish, we want to encourage fishing. People go have fun and catch them. If these are native fish, we might want to leave them alone for now until the numbers get higher. This fellow caught that in the Taunton River a few years back. That was a nice sized fish.
huge.
Yeah. So that was probably a 2-pounder, and that fish might have been 6 pounds. So it's a fun fish to catch. We've had a lot of declines with shad. In 1987, we banned net catching for shad. Haven't seen big responses. We closed the fishery for all rivers except the Connecticut River and Merrimack River 10 years later. So you can take 3 fish a day in those rivers. It's catch and release only at other rivers. But we really want to restore the population so people can take some of these fish. People do like to eat them. The roe is very good to eat. And so hopefully we can see some improvements with shad. And what they like is, this is in the Jones River. They took off the Elm Street Dam. And above that, beautiful pool riffle complexes. That's where they spawn. And there's a lot of these in the Setauket River, different tributaries in the Taunton River watershed. And we think water quality is improving in some areas. You know, the Clean Water Act got rid of industrial pollution in many places. So I think there's potential for this fish to do well. This fish doesn't mind if it gets a little bit warmer. So we're really hoping we can make some progress with American shad.
What are the implications of like Ludham's Ford in Pembroke, Hanover?
Yeah.
Where they want to basically take the dam out to, open it up. What are the implications there for the shed when they do that? Is that, there's a pretty good, well-known shed run there.
Right. It's a great question. So that's in the Indian Head River. I wish I had a slide to show you. That, yeah, this got clipped off, but that's part of the North River watershed where you can see pretty small drainage area, only 30 square miles, but it is by far the best small river shad fishery in Massachusetts. People always catch them there. My agency built that fishway in like 1972. It's the biggest fishway we ever built. It does not pass shad very well. So they're nervous about entering it. So we did a rehab 2 years ago. We replaced all the wood baffles. We got it tuned up nice. It's in good shape. I think the long-term outlet is you'd like to take that dam out. There are people that like the upstream impoundment, so it might take some while before we come around to that. I don't think you rebuild that fishway because there's a lot of shad habitat upstream. So right now, I say let's keep the fishway going, let's maintain it, but at some point, I think you probably want to consider taking that dam out. It'd be a huge, expensive rebuild. I can't believe our crew built that thing in the 70s. Mm-hmm. But we do know river herring go through it, trout go through it, a lot of species go through the fishway, shad don't like to.
Yeah, there's
Pretty high velocity going through that run.
Yeah.
It's a denial, which is a baffled system, so they can get through it, but what happens, there's so much competing flow around it, there's a middle jet, they have to find that jet and say, okay, I'm going through all this.
Yeah.
And shad are kind of nervous in that way, and so I don't think they find it very well. And so, I do respect the folks that want to keep the upstream impoundment, and I think it's really up to the community to come around to what they want to do. And I think it's fine to study it and figure out what to do, but I don't think you spend money to rebuild that fishway.
I don't think there's many fish above that dam, honestly.
I think some river herring, we know that river herring go up, but I think a freshwater fish, it's tough to say, but it's a good question for the future. I do think you would improve the shad run by taking that dam out.
Cool.
So here's the drainage area, big numbers, Connecticut River, really nice shad fishery right now. People catch a lot of them. Merrimack River's pretty good. The rest of them in Massachusetts are very small. The Charles River has shad, Neponset. There's 2 dams that come out and help the Neponset River. Palmer River has a few, North River. The Taunton River is cut off here. I apologize for that. We know there's shad there. I'm very bullish about the potential to restore shad to the Taunton River watershed. I think there's a lot of tributaries they could use. And, you go back 40, 50 years, a lot of industrial pollution. We know shad are sensitive to that. That was slowly eliminated as all that industry moved on. And so we have better water quality now than we had 50 years ago. So I hope we can get there.
They got that upriver pollution in the North River there too, though. They got that thing going on.
Above the dam, yeah. You have some legacy pollution like that from old mill sites, and then stormwater is still a big concern. When you have a lot of pavement, a lot of traffic, what comes off the road is not good for these fish. So when it rains, water quality declines. So quickly on the Taunton River Shad program, we've got a 5-year agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the Attleboro Hatchery. We pay them a little bit of money. We work with the Fish and Wildlife Division in Massachusetts, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They've stocked over 5 million shad in 2024, and then this year it dipped down to 3 million. But we've been stocking good numbers, and they raise them up. Well, they hatch them to larvae, and they put them right in the river. And so it's kind of exciting this is going on. I think that's all I have. We're doing some survey work. We caught the juvenile shad the first year they could have come back, and so we were happy to see that, but we haven't caught many. And then last year was the first year we could have caught adults, and we caught over 50 in the Taunton River. And so hoping those numbers might build. But there's one of the juveniles we caught. And we're testing the genetics to confirm that hatchery fish as opposed to native fish. If they're native fish, we don't want to see a lot of capture. If they're hatchery fish, why not catch them? Let the public, have a few fish. Okay, I'm going to move on to restoration activities. Any questions on the species? I went through that fairly quickly. But if you think of something, feel free to ask. So 2025 was a big year. These projects were all 10-year projects, multi-million dollars. Fall River Watershed, I'll talk about that. South River and Marshfield, that was this project here where they took a dam out and they made a nature-like fishway. Larkin Mill Dam in Newbury, took the dam out completely. Sasua Creek, 2 really bad culverts at 6A were replaced. A lot of fish died in those little culverts. Now we have nice large culverts there. And then Stony Brook and Brewster, they're restoring this beautiful, with these nature-like fishway weirs. Tough projects, takes a long time to design them, fund them. These all were completed in 2025. So really a good year. There's a bullet here about the DMF Fishway crew. We do small projects every year. That bullet's cut out, but here's the slide that talks about that. We did 6 small projects last year. Here's 3 of them. Replace the boards and improve the entrance stones that lead fish into the steep pass at Third Mill Pond in Herringbrook, Pembroke. Hinkley's Pond in Harwich. We built this fishway in 1987. We did a tune-up, repaired all the boards. We surveyed in a new staff gauge to monitor pond levels to help guide the fishway. And then here, Town of Falmouth, you had a collapsed pipe that fish struggled to get through. We daylighted this. The Town of Falmouth actually led the contract. We were going to do the work. It turned out to be a really big project, so we had the town contract it, and they opened up the pipe, daylighted it, so now it's a trough the fish pass through. And so things like turtles won't get caught up in this, so other wildlife will get through this easier than before. And probably the biggest job we did last year was the Cape Cod Canal. There's a series of weirs at the Army Corps of Engineers Canal where they were built in 1938 and they were really degraded. Our crew went in, replaced 2 the year before, 3 last year. We'll replace 2 this coming year. So we demo the weirs, we put in concrete forms, so we pour the concrete in and rebuild them. And then upstream, the Herring Run Motel, some of you may have seen the Herring Run Motel. We completely redid all the weirs, patched the concrete, and replaced all the wood boards. So really a tune-up for the Monument River Canal Fishway last year. And that was a good job for us. The costs were $1,500, $2,000. And if you contracted that job, it would have cost a lot more than that. And it was a case where one of our retiring Fishway crew guys was able to teach the young crew how to build forms, and so it was a good exercise for training for the new crew. So let me talk briefly about the Fall River in Braintree, because it's a really interesting project. Had 4 different places where fish couldn't pass, 2 dams, and then up at the reservoir, it was a water supply reservoir, so you couldn't remove the dam. So a fishway went in there. There was a natural rock falls the fish couldn't get through, so that was a nature-like fishway, and these 2 dams came out. And for the first time in 200 years, fish could pass through this watershed onto upstream habitats. So last year was pretty exciting. Here's the Rock Falls Fishway that went in 2025. And fish used to be hung up before this for years. They couldn't go anywhere. We never saw fish. They flew through here in a matter of days, and they went upstream last year for the first time.
Do you have to get the smell from the other ponds to get them to do that, though?
The river herring?
Or the herring?
The herring. Well, this is interesting. This is what led us to do this project, because for years, yeah, we would see, so this shows where it's green, fish could go in 2023. Where it's red, they were blocked. And so here's the Rock Falls. For years, we saw fish below the Rock Falls. Actually, in the late 80s, they weren't there. In the early 90s, they started showing up a few dozen, a few hundred. I think what happened, when I first started coming around this watershed in the 80s, there were still a few mills that were active. And I would see the river run orange or one white. I mean, people were still discharging industrial pollution. I think it slowly cleaned up, and river herring colonized this watershed, probably from the back river, Weymouth, maybe Charles River. They started showing up, so we started doing the job. It was a 20-year job. It took forever to figure things out. Eventually, the dams came out, the fishway was built. I told everybody they would not go to Sunset Lake because they wouldn't like it, and they wouldn't go this way, they would go this way. Well, they went to Sunset Lake immediately, as soon as they were able to, and they were spawning all over this ditch along the golf course. And people were calling up and saying, what's going on? All these fish are in the golf course. Then they went further up.
So they will go on their own then?
I think they colonize any place they can.
Yeah.
And we thought they would stay in the main stem and move up to here, and they did. But plenty went to Sunset Lake, and plenty went here. They were seeing the golf course for a month, just spawning in the ditches next to fairways. And people were like, what's going on there? So pretty exciting to see this. The town of Braintree is very exciting. And with 200 acres of habitat in green, you could establish a large population. Because you had, to my rough guess, maybe 5,000 fish in this scenario here, pre-restoration. So those 5,000 fish should move up, the numbers should increase. So that's a success story. I want to mention the Mystic River watershed, another success story. This was 2 fishways. So in 2000, yeah, that got cut off. 2011, no passage above here. By 2019, a new fishway here and a new fishway here. All of a sudden, they colonized all that habitat, additional 287 acres. This was pretty exciting. We knew it was going to lead to improvements, but here's the graph showing the numbers. This was before restoration in the Mystic in blue, about 200,000, and it increased to over 600,000. And then there's been 3 recent years, it's been the top run in Massachusetts. 700, 800,000 herring moving upstream. So very exciting. The other project that really led to a quick response, there was a dam in Pembroke that blew out in 2011. There was no passage. DMF rebuilt the fishway, and then here are the numbers once we built the fishway. And in this year, it was the biggest run in Massachusetts. So 2 success stories resulting from fishways, not so much dam removal. So to me, it's a tool. Every watershed, you choose what the best tool is, whether it's a fishway or a dam removal. People say, what happened here? It took us a few years to realize what happened. Beavers had blocked off the main stem. And we didn't realize that. These fish probably spawned elsewhere in the North River. It wasn't like they died, they didn't disappear, they just didn't come up Herring Brook. So they opened up the beaver dam. The beavers are going to still do fine. They didn't kill them. They just opened up the dam to let them in, and the numbers shot right up again. So 2 success stories in recent years that give me some encouragement that we might be able to really increase some of these herring populations. The other one I want to give you is the Mill River in Taunton. So here's a case where you had 4 locations that the fish couldn't pass in 2011. No access to all this habitat. Lake Sabbatia, Watson Pond, Winnacunnet. Division of Ecological Restoration started working in this watershed in 2005. They eventually took out 3 dams. The 4th dam was the water control for the pond. They couldn't take it out, so a fishway went in. 2018, all of a sudden, all this green is where they can go. And so 417 acres of habitat that they can access they couldn't before. So very encouraging. The numbers have come up modestly. There was 0 passing when we started, and they came up to about 30,000. In recent years, it's been between 10 and 25,000. So not numbers like in the Mystic or Pembroke, but still encouraging. And I still think it takes a while for these things to grow, so I'm hoping that those numbers will continue to increase. But that's a great example of multi-dams that were taken out of one watershed. And it just doesn't help. You know, we focus on river herring, but everything you can imagine is benefiting from that watershed being open.
Is that the herring one on Route 14 in Pembroke?
That's the one I talked about previously, yeah, that herring brook. They're talking about having a harvest, and they might this year have a modest harvest there. So keep an eye out for that. So I'm going to wrap things up by talking about Stump Brook here in this region. And this is going to take a while because it's kind of a complex story. In 2011, the Cotton Gin Mill Dam on the Setauket River prevented passage. And so you can see way up, in 2011, it's red all the way up. And the Montponset Ponds were a big target, lots of acres. And then from the other way, from Massachusetts Bay, the Jones River was blocked at the Wapping Road Dam, so fish couldn't reach Silver Lake, 640 acres. So a lot of partners got together, started working on this, and the first thing to happen was the Wapping Road Dam came out in 2011. And then in 2017, the Cotton Gin Mill Dam came out. And so with that, fish could access up to Forge Pond and then get into Robbins Pond. And then DMF got involved with the Stump Brook Bog Reservoir Dam in East Bridgewater. We first tried to see if it was feasible for a couple of years, if we had enough water. And we put out depth loggers to track how much water was available. Then we designed a fishway. We did a survey, designed a fishway, and we got a grant from the Taunton River Stewardship Council to get permits for the fishway. The permit cost us $32,000. We did the job in a couple of days for $3,000. So that's how it goes sometimes. We fabricated the fishway in our shop with recycled materials, and the fishway went in.
Who gets the $32,000?
We contracted, if you need a permit with the Conservation Commission, you have to get stamped engineering plans. And so if you got stamped plans, and that's where the cost is.
So basically, the engineers get it, but it's not the state getting the $32,000 fee.
We got the grant from the Taunton River Stewardship Council. We sent it right to a contract. Yeah, you had to have permits, so I understand that.
And you got to have those plans, I guess.
You do. You have to have the plan, and you have to confirm there's enough water. And we did that. It took us, a day to install this thing. It was really nice to work with a bog owner there. We put it in. We used recycled parts from the Elm Street dam removal in Kingston. So we took these pieces that were taken out of the dam removal, we put them in there, and then we had some aluminum there. Our costs were very low, and it was a fun project. We were so excited, and then things changed. Well, first let me talk about what happened. So again, I've lost the dates here, but the Wapping Road Dam came out. We put a small fishway in at Forge Pond Dam in 2019, and for the first time in a very long time, herring passed into Silver Lake. And so herring were now passing into Robbins Pond, and then we put the fishway in 2023 at the Bog Reservoir. So our goal was to get these fish to Montponset and Silver Lake, 1,460 acres of inaccessible habitat, by far the biggest target in Massachusetts. So very ambitious, very challenging, but you can imagine the production of herring if you could put fish in all these places. That's 1,460 acres. So, think back to Mystic, you gained 287 acres and you saw what happened, big numbers. So we're very bullish, but we recognize it's challenging. Water supply for the city of Brockton supplies cranberry bogs. Brockton manages flows that go from the ponds this way and flows that go this way. So very, very difficult project, but we were gaining. And then post-construction, the very first spring, there was a dam breach. And very concerning, all of a sudden, fish were passing the fishway for a brief period in mid-April, and then all of a sudden there was not enough water to run the fishway. And so very concerning. It took a while to understand what was happening. The dam owner had to drop the pond level because the dam breach was causing problems downstream. And then all of a sudden, the fishway...
That was the earthen dam?
Yes.
Yep.
So we designed this with the pond level that was there for 3 years before all this happened. And it was a low hazard dam, which meant it was non-jurisdictional with the Office of Dam Safety. Once this breach occurred, they made it a high hazard dam. And they said, whoa, you can't run the fishway. And so it really caused a problem. Things were dry in 2025. And then unfortunately, the dam owner passed away. And I'm now having discussions with a new dam owner to try to see what we can do to run this. But he probably needs to make changes to fix the dam and then get the pond up. I was there before this talk today. There's enough water to drive the fishway. But can we do that for a long period of time? And can we get juvenile herring back out again? So it's concerning because we're making such good progress with this. I'm not going to let go. I want to keep working on it, but we may have to wait until the dam is fixed and we can bring the pond up, or we can drop the fishway. And that's something I want to consider. If we drop the fishway elevation, we'll have enough water. But because it's now a high hazard, we have to play by the Office of Dam Safety rules. So that
They call it a high hazard after it blew out.
right?
Did he fix it?
No.
He brought all that, he repaired it.
Well, he repaired it on his own,
Yeah.
and then a few different permit authorities said he can't do that. And so he contracted an engineer to do what the state needed him to do, and then unfortunately he passed away. A fine gentleman, a wonderful guy. Yeah, nice guy. And so his daughter sold it to a cranberry bog guy who's running it now. I'm going to try to work with him to see what we can do, and we'll see where it goes. But we really want to move fish upstream. So here's a graphic that shows the watershed. And so that's where the fishway went in. And we had fish getting up here for a little while, but now there's problems at the Furnace Street culvert and the Elm Street culvert. Today, they're passable. They look good today because there's a lot of flow. But when the flow declines, these culverts are very much a problem. And so we're looking to investigate culvert replacement. And then we go further up, you got two culverts in the Burge Wildlife Area that they clog with debris readily. Beavers clog them up. They're culverts that don't need to be there. We're looking at replacing these. And then finally, the city of Brockton owns this fishway, this dam that sends water to Neponset, or Monponset, or out. This has a fishway, which is funny. They built a fishway here where there was no possible way the fish get there. They built it 40 years ago, and it's not a great fishway. We'd love to rehab it. My crew could fix it pretty easily, but we kind of have to fix these spots first. And that's the goal, and then I'll work with this. I've told the city of Brockton I want to work with them, but it makes sense to fix these spots first. So again, very ambitious to try to get fish into Monponset, but I think it's very much a worthwhile venture. It could produce a lot of river herring. So I'm starting to wrap things up now. So what we did, we got funding from the Taunton River Watershed Council in 2025 to do a feasibility study on the Elm and Furnace Street culverts, to look at what condition they were in, what were the elevations, did it make sense to try to replace these? So that was done. I hope to work with the new town administrator here in town to look at what we want to do with those culverts. I think they should be replaced, and I think in the meantime, when the boards are in, fish cannot pass. And I think that's Furnace, I believe. And right now, the boards are out, fish can pass. We'd like to have culverts where the fish can come and go as they want to. So we're hoping to do next stages of this, working with the town when we can. Meanwhile, we're going upstream to Burridge we funded with our own money a $25,000 study to look at the feasibility and the design of removing 2 culverts in the wildlife management area. That was contracted to Beta. They produced a nice design. We just went out and got another grant from the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program, $78,000. That'll pay for full design and permitting. And those aren't replacement culverts, those are removals. Just take them out and naturalize the stream. So this one's going forward. This one is good, but it's also, we got work to do down at the bog to try to understand how to get bog operations compatible to the fishway at the bog reservoir, and we've got to revisit Elm and Furnace. So there's a lot happening. I hope to work with the town of Halifax and all you folks on these projects to just get public support, try to come to a decision. It's a good thing to do. We think it is for fish passage, but obviously there's more than just fish passage to consider at these sites. Okay, this is my concluding slide. I just want to talk a little bit about river herring in the last few decades. A lot of improvements to improve fish passage, dam removals, fishways. We're seeing some improvements. We can definitely point to some locations that are improving. I will say Buzzards Bay, Taunton River watershed, not seeing as many improvements yet. So I worry about something regional is going on. To the north, we're seeing more improvements. Down this way, we're not. A lot of folks point to offshore bycatch of river herring and mackerel sea herring fisheries. I don't know if we have enough information to really see that's the reason. It could be climatic, but I'm hoping to see some of these improvements show down at this region. So I think I covered that. Overall modest improvements since 2005 in some areas, and otherwise herring populations remain depressed from historical levels with modest improvements in some areas. So I think it's good news that we've seen some improvements. I think we have a lot of work to do for river herring. I think shad, we have a lot of potential. Same with American eel. Rainbow smelt, I'm concerned about. They kind of have to figure things out in a warmer ocean. So that might be tricky. But that's it. I hope I didn't go too fast through all these topics, but I'm happy to stay and answer questions. Thank you.
One of the things that I think you mentioned it maybe twice is situations where a waterway was blocked by a blowdown during the winter or something like that, and then the fish are getting blocked up behind it and they can't get through.
Yeah.
So, and it sounded like one of them at least sat there for a couple of years before it got noticed. Now, so what if like we see something like that? It would have been good if a couple of years earlier somebody picked up the phone and called you. Maybe who would they call?
They in that case they call me. There's the Town River Fisheries Committee, and so when there's a herring committee or herring wardens, call the wardens or call me, and we'll do something about it. What I have found in this modern era of no harvest and declining populations, there's less awareness of this need. And so in some areas, no one's looking, no one's paying attention, and it depends. Some towns are still diligent, other towns have kind of forgot that you have to keep an eye on these things. The town river is a little bit larger, so there's a lot of area to keep an eye on. And so someone's got to get out. Stump Brook, there's a lot of area to keep an eye on. So feel free to call me anytime. What I'm trying to do is to train up locals to do this work themselves. And I mentioned the DP policy on stream maintenance. I was in Braintree last week getting a policy approved for the town of Braintree to have their local folks do the work. And we'll provide guidance, but I think there's so many herring runs. There's 46 towns that have herring runs. We can't be everywhere. You want that local stewardship. That's the best model.
When herring are running and the fishway is blocked, destroyed, whatever, do they go somewhere else and spawn? Do they not spawn? What happens?
It's a great question. I think they colonize whatever they can. They're pretty flexible. And, like a brook trout or Atlantic salmon has to go back to where it was from. I think when the dam blew out in Pembroke, I think they just spawned another tributary in the North River system. And so you saw that graph go down when the beavers didn't let them come in Herringbrook. I don't think they die. Some fish reabsorb their gonads, and so they skip spawning, and that's not a great thing. Some fish become more susceptible to predation when they go someplace else. So it's not what you want, but I think they are pretty good at colonizing new areas. But what we saw in Braintree, you took the dams out and they just went everywhere.
Thank you.
Up here, we have problems now. The last couple of months, we've had such low flow of the Stonebrook Dam up in Burridge.
Yeah.
Less than Brockton is supposed to take water from, and yet Brockton's still taking it.
Yeah.
Jones River, same problem, that the Silver Lake is so low, it's not flowing into Jones River anymore. Okay, the Department of Marine Fisheries putting pressure on Brockton to start using their other water sources like their aquarium plant.
It's a great question. It's a 30-year-old question. And basically, if a water supply has a registration on the Water Management Act or a permit, our agency can't tell them they have to release water. They're entitled to take their permitted amount. What we can do, though, is that they're still supposed to provide a fish passage. And so we can work with them. I'm working with the city of Brockton right now, Weymouth, Braintree, Situate, Weymouth, just like a bunch of places trying to find ways to get fish in and out. And the key is they have to be comfortable that we're not going to force them to release water against their permit. But if they have a surplus, we want to find ways to get fish and get fish out. With Brockton, I think they're allowing us to put a new fishway at Forge Pond Dam in Kingston, and they're allowing us to dredge the pond. And so by dredging the pond, it's going to make the avenue into Silver Lake cleaner. And so that's all, Brockton signed the permits for all that. So they do work with us, but we have to be realistic about what we're asking. It's really up to the Department of Environmental Protection to force them to release water and maintain their permit. And so that's where that happens. And I think they could do a better job of releasing flow. They're not supposed to have zero flow.
It's supposed to have 900,000 gallons a day leaving Stonebrook.
Right. But that's a Water Management Act. My agency, we can say you can't stop fish, but we can't tell them they have to meet their obligation to release flow. So we have to work with other agencies and try to figure out a way to get along. People need water. That's never going to change. And people are going to win over river herring every day. So it's really just finding ways to reclaim lost water, become more efficient, and focus on the periods when the fish are moving. And outside of those periods, then we're not worried about it. But I think you're going to see some progress in the Stonebrook watershed and the Jones River watershed in the next decade, because I think Brockton realizes that there's things they can do to become more efficient and have less loss of water. But it's a really difficult question, and I think Massachusetts could do a much better job overall, I think, of tightening up the requirement to leave some water for rivers. And that's a very generic statement to make, but I think there's some gains to be had there, I think.
Thank you.
And for Steve, I think you were out when I was talking about, I'll go back briefly. So for Stonebrook, we funded a study in 2025 with Taunton River Stewardship Council to look at the feasibility of improving the two culverts at Elm and Furnace. That study was completed. The next step there is to see what the town of Halifax wants to do. Those culverts, I believe, are owned by the town, and so it's really a discussion in the town of Halifax. I think we recommend replacement, but that's not easy. It's costly. But the next step is really what we're doing up at Burridge, the next culvert's up. We got money, we funded the first design for the Burridge culverts, then we got a grant to do design and permitting. So $78,000, it's a lot of money, but that will bring us permits to take out the Burridge culverts. So that's where we are. The next step, I think, for Elm and Furnace is to find money to do the design and permit for culvert replacement. You're not going to remove them. You have to have culverts there. And so really, that's what I would encourage there to be discussion here in town. What would you like to see at Elm and Furnace Street? We'll help you if you decide to remove them or replace them with something else. And we were able to get that grant that we're administering. We're going to go to bid on this very soon, and DMF will administer that grant. So that's the next discussion. And I think there's a lot of potential in Stonebrook for restoration. If we can get fish to Montponset ponds, you could have a lot of river herring potential. But you've got Elm, Furnace, Burridge, and you got to resolve things at the reservoir with the fishway, and then you've got to improve the fishway up at Stockbrook Fishway owned by the city of Brockton. So a challenging concept, but the fish used to come up there a long time
It
ago.
used to be called Monpont Herringbird
Yeah, they
before they renamed. I looked into renaming it at USGS, but it's a lot of rules.
Brad, if I may.
Sure.
Just to introduce myself to the room, my name is Stephen Saul, I'm a new town administrator. You're in good hands with this because if you look at my history and how I got to my role today, there was a herring run that floated by my house when I was a kid. I became interested in why the herring run and herring were not making it to their historical breeding grounds in Marston's Mills, which is a village in Barnstable. And I found out that it was due to milfoil and duckweed that were filling the river. So then as a 14-year-old, I made the choice to join the environmental science club at the high school, started my track in environmental science. I focused my undergrads technically in aquaculture, fisheries, and wildlife biology from Clemson University. I got involved in the administration side of things after working in conservation and fish management for over a decade. I have conservation agent experience. I have if you guys are familiar with the High Street Dam over in Bridgewater, which was basically a impoundment that was cleared to make it so that the river herring could make their way to Nipponicket for their historical breeding grounds. That was my project when I was the environmental planner. So we made sure that that project happened without any taxpayer dollars having to go towards the project as well. It was grant funded. I know this town has heard about grants. Grants pay for things like this. And then there was a lot of fundraising done to make sure we could close the gap. It was an $8 million project that came at no cost to the taxpayers. And then we restored the fish's ability to get back to their historic breeding grounds up in Nipponicket. And the key to that project when we were working with NOAA was they had a major piece of seawall grant money that's about $4.5 million. And they had a fish ladder that was in operation on the site. The fish ladder velocity was too high for the fish to physically make it through. They couldn't physically jump up the impoundment, and they couldn't go through the fish ladder, so they were being stuck right there at the bottom of the impoundment. So in order for them to actually make it back to where they'll actually breed, we had to take down the whole impoundment, redo the roadway over, redo the bridge over. It was an area that historically flooded in town because of creating an impoundment. We take the flood zone and we fill it up with all the water that has no place to go all of a sudden. So when it comes to projects like this, I know how they operate, I know how they're administered, I know where the grants are. It's just the fact that this town needs to get the ability to have our grants back. That's going to be a key message moving forward. If we have the ability to get grants, I will chase every single grant to make these projects happen. You can count on me for that. That's what I made my career on, was chasing grants and getting them. I get super competitive. I love collaborating with employees from DMF, NOAA, DEP, Conservation Commission in town will definitely be on board. We've got a new conservation agent that literally started last week. So things are looking up for these types of projects in town, especially with me at the helm, because these projects don't get passed, and sometimes they get passed over as far as not being a priority. I can easily make these a priority because they're directly linked to public health as well. So,
Great. Appreciate it. High Street Dam removal, a regionally important project in the last decade. Big project, very successful, and it took a huge partnership to make that happen. So you'll be hearing from me shortly. Any other questions?
Where can we find more information about projects that are going on, or to contact people, like if we see issues, like
I think, yeah, I can get you my contact, my email address, and anytime,
Is
give
it
me a
on
call.
that? Is it on that portal?
It isn't, I left my wallet at home today, so I might have some business cards.
Oh.
I'll give you a business card, and
Great.
anytime, let me know. I've got a staff of 7 right now, coast-wide, so we've got some pretty good support, and we'll respond. And we're very interested in this watershed. We just think the potential is so high for multiple species and infrastructure improvements at the same time. So we're very much excited to get the invite to come out and talk to you, because I knew that this was the audience that's going to pay attention to this concept. So I'll get a few business cards. Any other questions? Well, thank you all. You've been a good audience. Appreciate it.